The second book was recommended by Penn Jillette, the magician, in one of his Penn Point videos. Jillette is a big guy with a lot of swagger, bombastic, a bit of a bully, but that may be part of his act. Anyway, he was talking about this book, Human Smoke. He said he was up all night reading it. He said it really fucked him up, which for Penn Jillette is a rave review. So I got a copy and read it. The book is subtitled The Beginnings of World War II, The End of Civilization. It is a collection of short pieces taken from newspaper articles, diaries, memos, memoirs, and speeches, stitched together in chronological order, from the beginning of the century to the end of 1941. It would take too long to consider it point by point, so I'll just pass along some general thoughts. It didn't come as a revelation to me as it did to Jillette. I was fairly familiar with most of what it covered. It's terrible, full of the worst kind of atrocities in human behavior, and, since it ends at 1941, things were just getting warmed up as far as the body count was concerned. As wars progress, people become less concerned, on the whole, with decent moral action than they are with survival and revenge. Bitterness sets in, deeply. As someone in the book put it, people in the Air Force have given up on the sporting idea now, and are grimly determined to kill as many Germans as they can by any means possible. And the Pope at that time, Pius XII, said, "We must lament the fact that the limits of legitimate warfare have been repeatedly exceeded." This reminds me of the movie Grand Illusion. War is a horror, no question. One thing it does is to make a monstrous weapon out of reason. In war, it makes perfect sense to become as brutal as possible, to use explosives, machine guns, and thermite and napalm, and the chemical and biological weapons, aerial bombardment, blockades to create starvation, drones, and atomic missiles. It becomes completely reasonable to fight as furiously as possible. Let slip the dogs of war is no metaphor. In Hitler and Churchill, this book makes clear, history found the perfectly matched opponents to create maximum death and suffering. One who would do anything to win. We can achieve something only by fanaticism, he said. And one who would do anything, pay any price, not to lose. Do your worst, he told Hitler. We will do our best. Every nation involved fervently believed that the other side started it, and they were merely retaliating, answering in kind. Japan, for example, was provoked and forced into the attack on Pearl Harbor by an oil embargo and the menacing circle of bases around it on the Pacific Islands by the British and the Americans. Diplomacy failed. They had no other recourse but to strike. I think if someone started a clip service now and began to compile a similar collection up to the brink of the next conflagration, it would have a similar effect. War is terrible, but peace is far from perfect. It's a juggling act. It oozes corruption. It is an incubator of all sorts of illness, falsehoods, and weakness. It leads to a lack of focus, diffuse intentions, silliness, and moral decline. Freedom is as easily abused as power. War sometimes seems like a scourge, come to put an end to the madness of peace. 3 specific notes. One was the prison warden who was facing a softball game. He learned that one of his prisoners in solitary confinement was a good pitcher. He offered to release the man if he would play. The man said, "If you will release all of the prisoners in solitary, I will play." The warden agreed, and the man pitched a no-hitter. The camp went wild with cheers and joys, a mass catharsis of human misery, one man called it. When it came time for America to declare war against Japan, one representative, a woman from Montana, voted no. She was booed and hissed at. She was asked to change her vote to make it unanimous. She refused, saying that insistence on uniformity, that intolerance of dissent, was just what was wrong with the other side. And this contrast, when Neville Chamberlain addressed the House of Commons to officially declare war on Germany, it was the worst day of his public life, the ruin of all his efforts. Churchill, listening to him, was elated. He said he heard the call of honor, which thrilled my being. The author of the book said he wrote it to see if he could find out what, if anything, was good about what has been called the Good War. At the end of the book, he dedicates it to pacifists who failed to achieve any of their goals, but, he says, they were right. What is good and what is right? War perverts all meanings. Only death prevails. Might makes right. A reporter asked Roosevelt what he thought about being called a faker and a liar. Roosevelt said he thought it was a scream. Exactly. Like that picture by Edvard Munch. That kind of a scream.